Imagine a scenario where time travel is possible, and you possess a time machine. You decide to journey into the past to meet your grandfather when he was a young man. However, events take an unexpected and dramatic turn. While you're in the past, you unintentionally prevent your grandfather from ever meeting your grandmother. This means your parents were never born, and as a result, you were never born either. Here's the twist. If you were never born, how could you have traveled back in time to stop your grandfather from meeting your grandmother? If you never existed in the first place, then it would have been impossible for you to go back and create the situation that caused your non-existence. This results in a logical contradiction. Your actions in the past seem to erase your very existence. This is known as the grandfather paradox, a well-known conundrum in discussions about time travel and causality. The paradox directly challenges our understanding of cause and effect and raises critical questions about whether time is consistent and whether the past can truly be altered. To better visualize this paradox, imagine it like this. If time travel allowed you to change the past in a way that prevents your own existence, then logically, you should not have been able to make those changes. This leads to a situation in which the cause, your time travel, undermines the effect, your existence. The grandfather paradox arises because this cause-effect relationship becomes contradictory. This paradox isn't just a philosophical curiosity. It carries significant implications for how we understand time travel. If backward time travel were actually possible, it could generate contradictions and complex issues related to causality and the flow of time. The grandfather paradox leads to deep and intriguing questions about the very nature of time and reality. If traveling to the past could cause such paradoxes, then what does that suggest about the feasibility of going back in time? One commonly proposed solution to this paradox involves the idea of parallel universes or alternate timelines. According to this theory, if you were to travel back and change past events, you wouldn't alter your own timeline. Instead, you'd create a new parallel timeline in which those changes occur. In this alternate timeline, your actions may have prevented your own birth, but the original timeline, the one you came from, remains untouched. Thus, the paradox is resolved because your actions don't retroactively undo your own existence. They just spawn a new reality. Another approach to resolving the paradox involves the concept of time loops, also known as closed timeline curves. This theory suggests that past events exist within a closed loop where everything that happens has already been accounted for. In this view, anything you do while traveling back in time is already integrated into the timeline, making it impossible to change crucial events like your grandfather meeting your grandmother. The timeline remains self-consistent, and any actions you take will never result in logical contradictions, because they were always part of the timeline to begin with. This interpretation resolves the paradox by asserting that the past cannot be changed in ways that would result in inconsistency. Your existence and your actions in the past are part of a predetermined, unchangeable sequence of events. The grandfather paradox also invites us to consider the limits of our understanding of time and causality. It pushes against our intuitive notions of how cause and effect work and challenges us to rethink how time flows and whether it can be altered. More than just a philosophical brain teaser, the grandfather paradox has significant implications across multiple disciplines, including physics, philosophy, and popular culture. It stimulates meaningful discussions about the essence of time, the nature of causality, and the viability of time travel. In physics, the paradox raises fundamental questions about whether the laws of nature allow for time travel while maintaining consistency. Although Einstein's theory of relativity permits the theoretical possibility of time travel under certain conditions, it also implies constraints that may prevent paradoxes. Some physicists argue that phenomena like infinite energy requirements or the nature of closed time-like curves could inherently block paradoxical scenarios from ever occurring. From a philosophical standpoint, the paradox challenges our views on free will and determinism. If time travel were real, would we still have the freedom to change the past, or would all our actions be predetermined and locked into the timeline? It forces us to confront the implications of altering historical events and how that could reshape our understanding of reality itself. In popular culture, the grandfather paradox has been a rich source of inspiration. Countless novels, films, and TV series have explored time travel and the consequences of paradoxes in imaginative and thought-provoking ways. These fictional stories often present creative scenarios that highlight both the danger and intrigue of manipulating time. Looking ahead, the grandfather paradox continues to serve as a valuable thought experiment, pushing the boundaries of how we perceive time and existence. Even though time travel remains a theoretical concept, the paradox helps us examine the deeper challenges and limitations that would arise if such travel became a reality. In conclusion, the grandfather paradox is a powerful and perplexing puzzle that forces us to rethink our fundamental beliefs about time, causality, and reality. By delving into this paradox and considering its broader implications, we gain richer insights into the complexities of time travel and the profound philosophical questions it raises. The paradox of choice. Why more can mean less? At first glance, the idea that having more options could lead to unhappiness seems counterintuitive. We tend to believe that the freedom to choose from a wide range of possibilities should naturally enhance our satisfaction. Yet, psychological research has revealed a surprising truth. Too many choices can actually reduce our happiness. This concept, famously explored by psychologist Barry Schwartz in his book, The Paradox of Choice, Why More is Less, challenges our assumptions about freedom and fulfillment. To grasp this paradox, consider a familiar situation. You're standing at an ice cream parlor faced with 10 different flavors. On the surface, this seems ideal. You can pick the exact flavor you crave, but the abundance of options may leave you feeling uncertain and overwhelmed. Rather than feeling empowered, you might struggle to make a decision, overanalyze each option, and walk away less satisfied, even after you've made a choice. So why does this happen? Schwartz identifies several psychological dynamics at play. One of the most significant is decision fatigue. When we're presented with too many alternatives, the mental effort required to weigh them all drains our cognitive energy. This exhaustion diminishes our ability to make satisfying choices and may even result in decision paralysis, where we become so overwhelmed that we can't choose at all. Another crucial factor is regret. With so many options on the table, we're more likely to second guess our decision. The mind starts to wander. What if the other one was better? This persistent doubt can diminish our enjoyment of the choice we made, overshadowing any satisfaction it might have brought. Then there's the pursuit of perfection. The more choices we have, the more we believe that a flawless option must exist. We hold out, search longer, and scrutinize harder, only to be disappointed when reality falls short of the ideal we imagined. Even a good choice may feel insufficient in the shadow of imagined perfection. This psychological toll, often referred to as choice overload, can have a direct impact on our well-being. Studies show that when people are faced with a vast number of choices, they report feeling more stressed, less happy, and more unsure about the decisions they make. The mental strain of evaluating numerous options and the lingering fear of having made the wrong choice weigh heavily on our minds. Let's now delve deeper into the psychological roots of this paradox and examine the key forces that shape it. Inside the psychology of choice overload, several cognitive mechanisms help explain why having more options can lead to less satisfaction. One of the most important is the distinction between maximizers and satisficers. Maximizers aim for the absolute best in every decision. They want the optimal outcome and will examine every option exhaustively. Satisficers, on the other hand, settle for what meets their standards. They seek good enough rather than the best. Research suggests that maximizers tend to be less satisfied, more anxious, and more prone to regret, as they continuously wonder whether a better option was left unexplored. In contrast, satisficers often experience greater peace of mind and contentment with their decisions. Choice paralysis is another core element. When the number of options becomes overwhelming, people often find it difficult to commit. The sheer weight of possibility can stall decision making, leading to delays or even complete avoidance. This indecision breeds frustration and dissatisfaction. Self-doubt also plays a significant role. When options abound, it becomes easier to question our own judgment. Did we choose correctly? What did we miss out on? This inner turmoil, intensified by the fear of making the wrong choice, can sap the joy from even a seemingly good decision. Then there's the influence of social comparison. In a world filled with options, we often look at what others choose and compare. This can breed envy, insecurity, or a feeling of inadequacy if someone else's choice appears better than ours. Even if our decision fits our needs, the belief that someone else chose better can diminish our satisfaction. Finally, the opportunity cost of choosing becomes more pronounced as choices multiply. The more options we have, the more aware we are of what we're giving up by selecting one path over another. This constant awareness of lost alternatives, what we didn't choose, can create dissatisfaction with what we did choose. Real life reflections, where the paradox plays out. The paradox of choice isn't confined to theory. It's embedded in everyday life, from what we buy to who we love. In consumer behavior, one of the most cited studies involved a jam tasting. When shoppers were offered a large selection of jam flavors, they were less likely to make a purchase than when offered a smaller selection. Too many options led to hesitation, second guessing, and ultimately, less satisfaction, even when a purchase was made. Career choices also highlight this dilemma. With so many paths and professional possibilities, individuals can feel paralyzed by indecision. The desire to make the perfect choice often leads to procrastination, anxiety, or even regret, especially if we suspect we've missed out on something better. In romantic relationships, dating apps and social media expose people to a seemingly endless supply of potential partners. But instead of increasing satisfaction, this abundance can make people less committed, more doubtful, and constantly wondering if someone better is just a swipe away. This mentality can erode the quality and depth of real relationships. How to escape the trap of too much choice? Fortunately, there are strategies that can help us navigate the overwhelming sea of options and find greater contentment. Simplify the decision-making process. By narrowing down options and focusing on key criteria, We reduce the mental strain of making a choice. Clear priorities and a smaller pool of candidates make decisions more manageable and satisfying. Limit your choices intentionally. It might seem strange, but restricting your options can actually increase your happiness. For example, choosing to consider only a handful of products when shopping can lead to faster decisions and fewer regrets. Adopt a satisficing mindset. Let go of the need for perfection. Recognize that good enough is often more than enough. This reduces the pressure to find the best possible choice and allows you to be more at peace with your decisions. Practice gratitude and acceptance instead of dwelling on what might have been. Focus on what is. Appreciate the positive aspects of your chosen option and accept that no choice is without trade-offs. This shift in perspective can significantly boost your sense of fulfillment. Final thoughts. The paradox of choice reveals a hidden truth about modern life. Freedom without limits can become a burden. While choice is a fundamental component of autonomy, too much of it can erode our happiness, confuse our values, and cloud our judgment. By understanding the psychological mechanisms behind this paradox and applying practical strategies to manage our decisions, we can make wiser, more fulfilling choices, and perhaps reclaim the joy that too many options can steal. The Ship of Theseus, a timeless inquiry into identity and continuity. The Ship of Theseus presents one of philosophy's most enduring and intellectually stimulating paradoxes, raising fundamental questions about the nature of identity, transformation, and what it truly means for something to remain the same through time. At its core, the paradox hinges on a process of gradual replacement. Imagine a ship once sailed by the legendary hero Theseus, preserved by the people of Athens to honor his heroic deeds, including his famed encounter with the Minotaur. Over time, as the wooden planks of the vessel began to rot and weaken, each component was methodically replaced with a new one: the masts, the beams, the planks, until not a single original piece remained. The pressing question then emerges: is this entirely restored vessel still the same Ship of Theseus? Although the structure, shape, and function of the ship are preserved, the absence of any original material complicates the notion of its continuity. On the surface, many might assert that the ship remains unchanged. It still stands as a tribute to Theseus, performing the same role and retaining the same outward form. But if none of its original parts remain, can it still rightfully claim to be the very vessel Theseus once sailed? This question leads us into the philosophical territory of identity over time, a concept that explores how something can remain itself even while undergoing transformation. One classical approach considers physical continuity, suggesting that identity is tied to the preservation of original material. According to this view, replacing parts gradually erodes the ship's original identity, and once every component is new, it is, in essence, a different ship. But this view leads to further ambiguity. How many parts must be replaced before the identity is lost? Is there a precise moment the ship ceases to be the Ship of Theseus? Or is the transition so gradual that the loss of identity cannot be pinpointed? In contrast, conceptual continuity emphasizes the role, function, and recognition of the object over its material composition. From this angle, the Ship of Theseus remains the same as long as it continues to serve the same symbolic and functional purpose. We often apply this perspective in everyday life. Take, for example, a restored artifact in a museum. Even if its original material has been replaced, it is still considered authentic because it represents a historical legacy. This conceptual approach invites another critical question. What exactly are we identifying when we say the ship is the same? Is it the physical object, the historical symbol, or the conceptual role it fulfills? If identity is based on perception and purpose rather than material substance, does that mean anything that fits the description or function can be labeled the same? The paradox deepens with a clever twist. Imagine that all the discarded, original parts of the ship were preserved and later reassembled into a complete vessel. Now we have two ships, one made entirely of new materials and another constructed from the original components. Which of these is the true ship of Theseus? If identity is tied strictly to original matter, then the reassembled ship should be the authentic one. After all, it contains the exact parts Theseus once sailed with. Yet this vessel has not maintained the continuity of function or presence. It was not the ship celebrated and maintained over time. The other ship, though composed of replacements, has been preserved in service, ceremony, and memory. This scenario forces us to reevaluate our assumptions. Might it be possible that both ships, in different respects, are the ship of Theseus? One representing material origin, the other representing historical and functional continuity? This dual nature of identity, material versus conceptual, is not confined to ancient thought experiments. It plays out in modern debates around cultural heritage and preservation. For example, when restoring ancient buildings or artworks, we often face a dilemma. Should we preserve the original, even if decayed, or restore it with new materials to preserve its form and purpose? Both approaches carry implications for authenticity and continuity, mirroring the debate between the two ships of Theseus. The paradox also takes on new life in the context of modern technology and medicine. In today's world, where human organs can be replaced and prosthetics can mimic lost limbs, we're led to ask, how much can a person change physically and still remain the same individual? If every part of a body were replaced over time, would the person still be the same? This is not just a theoretical question. It touches on real-world ethical and philosophical concerns. What defines personal identity? Is it our physical body, our memories, our consciousness, or something more abstract? Memory and consciousness provide another layer to the puzzle, while a ship lacks self-awareness. We can extend the analogy to human identity. Just as the ship was gradually replaced, we as people experience change, physical aging, psychological development, and shifting beliefs. Are we still the same person we were as children? Or have we become someone else entirely? From this perspective, continuity of memory, personality, and self-awareness might play the defining role in personal identity. Many philosophers support the idea of psychological continuity, the notion that as long as our memories, traits, and consciousness persist, we remain ourselves. Another compelling theory is that of narrative identity. According to this view, who we are is shaped by the ongoing story we tell about our lives. Our identity emerges not from a single trait or component, but from the evolving narrative of experiences, values, and personal meaning. Even amidst great change, if the story remains coherent, we consider ourselves the same person. Beyond individuals, the ship of Theseus applies to cultures and societies as well. Traditions, monuments, and symbols often change over time. They are repaired, updated, and reinterpreted, but they retain their cultural identity. Religious relics, national flags, and institutions like universities may change form, yet they continue to serve the same foundational role and are still seen as embodiments of shared history. Even in legal and institutional frameworks, functional identity often supersedes physical identity. A corporation or public office might undergo countless leadership and structural changes, yet its legal identity and societal function persist. In law, biology, and technology, we repeatedly confront Ship of Theseus like dilemmas. A restored artifact may retain its legal identity despite being physically new. A human body replaces all its cells over time, yet we remain the same individual. A computer may be upgraded piece by piece, yet continue to be referred to as the same machine. In conclusion, the Ship of Theseus is not just an ancient puzzle about planks and sails. It's a window into our deepest questions about what it means to persist through time. Whether we're exploring legal ownership, personal growth, cultural preservation, or technological replacement, the paradox invites us to reconsider identity not as a fixed essence, but as something dynamic, shaped by continuity of purpose, memory, function, and meaning. Ultimately, the Ship of Theseus urges us to embrace a broader, more nuanced understanding of identity, one that transcends material parts and touches the very essence of what it means to endure, evolve, and remain ourselves in an ever-changing world. The liar's paradox is a timeless and fascinating conundrum in both philosophy and logic, challenging our understanding of truth and self-reference. At its core, it arises from statements that refer to themselves in ways that create logical contradictions. To grasp the depth of this paradox, we must explore its structure and the profound implications it has for our understanding of logical systems. The simplest form of the paradox is the statement, "This statement is false." When we attempt to evaluate its truth, we run into a dilemma. If the statement is true, then it must be false, as it claims. But if it is false, then it must actually be true, because it correctly states its own falsehood. This creates a loop of contradiction, where the statement cannot consistently be labeled as either true or false. This paradox exposes a critical issue with self-referential statements in classical binary logic, which insists that every proposition must be either true or false. The liar's paradox disrupts this binary framework, revealing situations where truth values become indeterminate. Historically, the paradox can be traced back to ancient times. One of its earliest expressions is attributed to the Greek philosopher Epimenides, who declared, "All Cretans are liars." Since Epimenides himself was a Cretan, his statement becomes self-referential. If his claim is true, then as a Cretan he is lying, which makes the statement false. But if it's false, then not all Cretans are liars, contradicting his statement. This early example captures the paradoxical essence of self-reference. In modern logic, the liar paradox is often formalized using the statement, "This statement is false," to demonstrate how self-reference alone can create contradiction. It challenges our ability to classify propositions cleanly and reveals weaknesses in the foundations of logical reasoning. The liar paradox can be expanded into more complex forms. For instance, consider the claim, "This statement is neither true nor false." This version suggests the need for alternatives to binary logic, perhaps a system with more than two truth values. Other variations involve networks of statements that reference each other's truth values, leading to even more intricate webs of contradiction. Such complexities highlight the liar paradox's importance in formal logic, where it uncovers vulnerabilities in systems built on classical assumptions. Traditional frameworks struggle with statements that are both self-referential and logically inconsistent, pushing theorists to consider new logical models that can address these anomalies. To manage these issues, some formal systems have introduced safeguards. One such approach is type theory, pioneered by Bertrand Russell and others. In this system, sets and statements are organized into a hierarchy where a set cannot contain itself or reference sets of the same or higher level. This stratification prevents the creation of paradoxical self-reference by design. Philosophically, the liar paradox provokes deep questions about the nature of truth and meaning. It challenges the long-held belief that every statement must fall neatly into categories of true or false. The paradox urges us to rethink our assumptions and explore more nuanced or multi-valued logical frameworks to address these challenges. Additionally, the paradox underscores the complexity of language. When a sentence refers to itself, it can create a loop that defies straightforward interpretation. This calls into question how meaning is constructed and suggests that self-referential language may require special handling to avoid contradictions. In response to these challenges, alternative theories have emerged. Semantic theories seek to explain how truth and meaning can be consistently defined even in the presence of self-reference. These theories propose layered or hierarchical approaches to truth to avoid paradox. Another perspective is dialetheism, which argues that some statements can be both true and false simultaneously. This controversial approach rejects the law of non-contradiction and offers a new way to interpret paradoxes like the liar paradox without treating them as flaws in logic. The influence of the liar paradox extends far beyond abstract philosophical discourse. It has shaped developments in logic, mathematics, computer science, and linguistics, forcing experts in these fields to reevaluate foundational concepts and practical methods. In computer science, for example, the paradox sheds light on issues of self-reference and recursion in programming. Functions that call themselves, known as recursive functions, must be carefully designed to include base cases that ensure they eventually terminate. Without this, they can fall into infinite loops or produce undefined behavior, akin to the logical problems posed by the paradox. In mathematics, the liar paradox paved the way for major discoveries, such as Gödel's incompleteness theorems, which show that any sufficiently powerful formal system contains true statements that cannot be proven within the system itself. Gödel's work built upon ideas reflected in the liar paradox and demonstrated that no formal system can be both complete and consistent. This revelation has deep implications for the foundations of mathematics and logic. Linguistics also benefits from the study of self-reference and the paradox. Linguists examine how such statements affect the structure and interpretation of language. Semantic theories in this field help determine how meaning and truth can be maintained when language turns inward on itself. Culturally, the liar paradox has inspired countless works of literature, art, and film, especially in genres like science fiction, which frequently explore the boundaries of logic and reality. These creative expressions often use paradox as a tool to highlight the complexity of truth and the ambiguity of human understanding. Ultimately, the liar paradox is more than an intellectual puzzle. It is a powerful lens through which we can examine the limits of logic, the subtleties of language, and the deep philosophical questions surrounding truth and meaning. Its influence continues to provoke thought and inspire innovation across disciplines, reminding us of the ongoing need to refine our systems of reasoning. The Bootstrap Paradox, a timeless loop of cause and effect. The Bootstrap Paradox, also referred to as the causal loop or ontological paradox, presents a baffling challenge to our conventional understanding of time and causation. It arises from hypothetical situations involving time travel, where an object, idea, or piece of information is sent back in time and becomes the very reason for its own existence. This self-reinforcing cycle creates a closed loop with no identifiable point of origin. To grasp this paradox, consider a classic time travel scenario. Imagine a time traveler journeys to the past with a copy of a famous novel. He hands the book to a young, aspiring writer who studies it, learns from it, and eventually publishes it under their own name. Decades later, this same book is the one the time traveler takes back in time. In this strange loop, the book seems to have appeared out of thin air. It has no identifiable beginning, no original author. Its existence is caught in a cycle of self-creation. This is the essence of the Bootstrap Paradox, a circular chain of cause and effect where an item or idea exists only because it is looped back into its own history. There is no external or initial source, only an unbroken feedback loop that challenges the linear nature of time. In classical physics, time flows in a single direction, from the past to the present, and then into the future. Events follow a strict sequence. Causes precede effects. However, the bootstrap paradox disrupts this linear model by introducing the possibility of nonlinear time, where events loop and intertwine. Such a framework forces us to rethink not only how time operates, but also how causality unfolds when the past and future become entangled. This paradox doesn't just question time, it also challenges the very foundation of existence and information. If a book, a machine, or a blueprint exists solely because it was transported through time in a loop, without any original creator or moment of invention, then what does that say about the nature of reality? How can something exist without being created? The bootstrap paradox pushes us to reevaluate our beliefs about origin, creation, and the flow of information. Let's delve deeper by exploring a variation of the paradox. Suppose a time traveler acquires a blueprint for a highly advanced machine from the future and brings it into the past. A scientist receives this blueprint and builds the machine. Years later, the machine is used to send that same blueprint back in time, completing the loop. In this case, the blueprint and the machine both exist, yet neither was ever originally invented. They are caught in a self-replicating cycle that defies logical progression. This recursive loop presents a major challenge to our concept of causality. It introduces the idea that something can exist not because it was created, but simply because it has always existed within a closed timeline. This stands in stark contrast to our intuitive understanding of cause and effect, where each effect is tied to a definable cause. Such a loop also raises concerns about logical stability. If an element within the loop were to change, even slightly, it could unravel the entire sequence. For example, if the blueprint differs in even one critical detail, the machine built might not work, which would prevent the time traveler from retrieving and sending the correct blueprint back in time. This instability suggests that causal loops might not be sustainable or consistent over time, further deepening the paradox. Beyond physics and logic, the bootstrap paradox has profound philosophical implications, particularly regarding free will and determinism. If every event within a causal loop is predestined, locked into an unchangeable timeline, then to what extent are individuals acting out of free will? If actions are merely repetitions of what was already written into the loop, the concept of choice begins to erode, suggesting a deterministic universe governed by unbreakable causal chains. As we examine the Bootstrap Paradox more closely, its implications for time travel become even more provocative. If such loops are possible, they could lead to incredibly complex and paradoxical outcomes that defy conventional thinking. Time travel, in this light, is not just a tool for altering the past, but a mechanism that might trap us in eternal recursions of self-generated events. In its final analysis, the Bootstrap Paradox forces us to reflect on the very essence of reality, time, and knowledge. It introduces a world where objects and information might exist without creation, where time isn't a line but a loop, and where causality becomes entangled with itself in ways we are only beginning to fathom. One of the most disconcerting aspects of this paradox is how it treats information. If knowledge can exist without ever being discovered or invented, if it simply circulates in a loop, what does that say about our models of learning and discovery? Are we creating knowledge, or merely unearthing what has already been passed down through paradoxical means? In conclusion, the Bootstrap Paradox is not just a quirk of science fiction. It is a profound thought experiment that stretches the boundaries of our understanding. It forces us to question the foundations of physics, metaphysics, and epistemology. Through it, we are invited to explore a universe far more intricate than a straight line through time, a universe where the past may be written by the future, and where cause and effect are inseparably knotted together. The Barber Paradox, a self-referential dilemma that shook logic and mathematics. First brought to light by Bertrand Russell in the early 1900s, the Barber Paradox stands as a thought-provoking example of a self-referential paradox, one that reveals deep flaws in logic and set theory. To understand its full weight, picture a peculiar scenario: a small town with a single barber who abides by an unusual rule. He shaves all and only those men in the town who do not shave themselves. At first glance, the rule seems simple, but this leads us into a logical conundrum. Does the barber shave himself? Let's break this down. If the barber does shave himself, he violates his own rule. He's supposed to only shave those who don't shave themselves. That would mean he shouldn't be shaving himself. On the other hand, if the barber does not shave himself, then he qualifies as someone who doesn't shave himself, meaning he must be shaved by the barber, which is himself. Either scenario produces a contradiction. This circular logic exposes the fundamental problem of self-reference, where definition refers back to itself in a way that breaks the logical structure it's part of. This paradox isn't just a quirky brain teaser. It reveals a deeper problem in how we define sets and rules. Specifically, it shows that including or excluding oneself in a set or rule without strict limitations can lead to inconsistency. The Barber paradox is a subset of Russell's broader paradox, both of which were instrumental in highlighting the cracks in what was then referred to as naive set theory. At the time, mathematicians were striving to build a strong, unshakable foundation for mathematics. But paradoxes like this one show that unrestricted definitions, especially those involving self-inclusion, made the entire structure vulnerable to contradiction. This led to a major reevaluation of logical and mathematical systems. The Barber paradox played a crucial role in the shift toward more rigorous, constraint-driven formal frameworks. Unpacking the logic and philosophy behind the paradox. The true weight of the Barber paradox lies not just in its contradiction, but in its implications for logic, mathematics, and philosophy. At its heart, it challenges the assumption that rules and sets can safely refer to themselves. The barber belongs to the group he defines, but being both inside and outside that group simultaneously is logically impossible. This type of circular reasoning isn't just a problem for barbers. It's a red flag in any formal system. How do we construct sets or categories that don't collapse under their own definitions? Russell's broader paradox asked a similar question. Consider a set of all sets that do not contain themselves. Does this set contain itself? If it does, then by definition, it shouldn't. If it doesn't, then it should. This illustrates that naive set theory, which allows sets to define themselves freely, is insufficient for creating coherent systems. The solution? Systems that prohibit or carefully regulate self-reference. Responses to the paradox. New foundations for set theory. To resolve the contradictions exposed by such paradoxes, mathematicians propose stricter frameworks. Russell himself proposed type theory, a hierarchy where sets exist at levels, or types, and a set of one type cannot contain sets of its own or higher type. This effectively blocks the kind of self-reference that creates paradoxes. Another widely accepted system is Zermelo-Fraenkel's set theory ZF or ZFC with the axiom of choice. One of its key tools is the axiom of regularity or foundation, which ensures that no set can be a member of itself. This restriction eliminates the possibility of sets looping back onto themselves, thus avoiding the logical pitfalls that lead to contradictions like those seen in the Barber paradox. These formal systems represent the evolution of mathematics, from intuitive but flawed foundations to carefully structured logical systems designed to handle complexity without falling apart. Beyond mathematics, the broader reach of the paradox. The influence of the Barber paradox extends far beyond pure mathematics. In computer science, the paradox is relevant to recursive functions and algorithms, especially those involving self-reference. For instance, when writing a function that calls itself recursion, care must be taken to define base cases to prevent infinite loops, much like we must avoid circular definitions in logic. Similarly, in database systems, recursive queries, such as those used to map hierarchical relationships like employees and subordinates, can run into issues if not properly bounded. The Barber paradox serves as a conceptual guide for understanding how to design systems that handle recursion without contradiction or infinite regress. In philosophy, the paradox opens up discussions about the limits of formal reasoning, language, and truth. It exemplifies the challenges of creating definitions that include or refer to themselves and has become a staple in debates around meaning, semantics, and self-awareness. Cognitive science also finds the paradox illuminating, as it highlights how human reasoning grapples with self-referential ideas. Studying how people resolve or get trapped by such paradoxes offers insights into the boundaries of our cognitive capacities. Educational value. Teaching through paradox. In classrooms, the Barber paradox is a powerful educational tool. It introduces students to the necessity of precise language, formal definitions, and constrained logic. By engaging with a paradox, learners are encouraged to think critically about systems, rules, and the dangers of assumptions. Educators use it to illustrate how small definitional oversights can lead to major logical inconsistencies, and how rigorous reasoning helps us build systems that avoid these traps. Cultural significance. From literature to pop culture, the Barber paradox, like many profound logical puzzles, has permeated literature and popular culture. Writers and filmmakers often use self-referential motifs to explore identity, truth, and reality. Paradoxes like these become metaphors for the challenges of understanding complex systems or navigating contradictory truths. Films, novels, and even philosophical science fiction often echo the structure of such paradoxes, creating stories that loop back on themselves or characters trapped in recursive realities. By referencing such paradoxes, creators not only engage audiences with intellectually rich material, but also spark broader conversations about logic, perception, and meaning. In conclusion, why the barber paradox still matters. Though it began as a playful thought experiment, the barber paradox remains a foundational example in understanding the limits of logic and the dangers of unregulated self-reference. Its implications ripple through mathematics, computer science, philosophy, education, and culture. It reminds us that even the simplest rules, when turned inward, can unravel the very systems they were meant to support. And in doing so, it continues to inspire new approaches, deeper questions, and more resilient logical frameworks. As we explore the boundaries of formal systems and human understanding, paradoxes like this one serve not as roadblocks, but as signposts pointing toward deeper truths. Zeno's dichotomy paradox, a journey through infinity. Zeno's dichotomy paradox is a timeless thought experiment that challenges our understanding of motion and the infinite. Imagine preparing to run a race. According to Zeno, before you can reach the finish line, you must first travel halfway there. But once you've crossed that halfway mark, you must again travel half the remaining distance, then half of what's left again, and again, forever. This endless subdivision continues infinitely. At first glance, this seems logical, yet it presents a baffling question. If there are infinitely many steps to complete, how can you ever finish the race? Picture yourself in motion. You begin by running half the total distance. From that point, you now face half of the remaining stretch. Every forward movement becomes another act of dividing the leftover distance in half. No matter how close you get, there's always more to cover. This paints the journey as a never-ending task, suggesting that motion, something we experience constantly, may be an illusion. If reaching the finish line requires completing an infinite number of steps, how is arrival even possible? Zeno's paradox fundamentally contradicts our everyday experiences. We live in a world where we regularly move from point A to point B without apparent hindrance. But Zeno, a follower of the philosopher Parmenides, used this paradox to argue that motion is logically inconsistent and ultimately impossible. Parmenides believed that change and motion were illusions. Through paradoxes like the dichotomy, Zeno set out to prove that our senses deceive us, that beneath the surface, reality is static and unchanging. This thought experiment isn't just a clever brain teaser, it's a deep philosophical challenge. It forces us to reconsider our intuitive grasp of space and time. If a finite journey demands infinite steps, does that mean all motion is an illusion? Or is our understanding of infinity simply flawed? Zeno of Elea, the ancient Greek thinker behind this idea, crafted the dichotomy paradox not merely as a puzzle, but as a critique of motion itself. His goal was to expose logical contradictions in how we perceive movement and to defend the idea that reality is one, unchanging, and indivisible. While Zeno's arguments were powerful in their time, later thinkers found ways to address these paradoxes. Enter calculus, developed centuries later by Isaac Newton and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz in the 17th century. With the birth of calculus came a breakthrough in understanding infinite processes. Calculus revealed that while a task can involve infinitely many steps, those steps can become so small that their total sum is still finite. In mathematical terms, a converging infinite series can have a finite total. So, although you may divide the distance to the finish line infinitely, the cumulative distance remains limited, meaning, yes, you can reach your goal. This resolution transformed the paradox from a roadblock into a gateway for advancing science and mathematics. Our daily lives mirror this resolution. Consider any task that seems daunting or complex. Writing a book starts with a single word. Solving a problem begins with the first step. Assembling furniture requires one piece at a time. These are all examples where a seemingly endless sequence of actions results in a finished product. The infinite nature of the steps is only theoretical. In practice, we complete them with measurable progress. Imagine walking across a room. Even if you mentally divide the space into endlessly smaller segments, your movement continues. With each step, no matter how small, you get closer to your destination. Eventually, you reach the other side. The paradox doesn't stop your journey. It just illustrates that the pieces of progress shrink to the point of insignificance. Psychologically, this idea can be empowering. When a task seems infinite or overwhelming, reminding ourselves that small, consistent progress accumulates into completion can make the goal feel achievable. This concept aligns beautifully with the paradox's resolution. Infinite steps don't prevent success. They simply demand perspective. Zeno's dichotomy paradox has left its mark far beyond ancient philosophy. It sparked revolutions in mathematics and inspired countless thinkers across centuries. It led to the development of key mathematical ideas like limits and continuity, crucial for understanding motion, change, and growth in science and engineering. In popular culture, the paradox has served as a metaphor in literature, film, and art. It symbolizes the struggle of endless progress, the illusion of motion, and the mysteries of time. Science fiction writers have used the idea to explore alternate realities, time loops, and infinite universes, stories that push the limits of our imagination. Artists have visually represented the paradox by creating pieces that evoke the feeling of endless progression, spirals, infinite paths, or recurring patterns. These artistic expressions help us grasp abstract concepts like infinity and movement, revealing how deeply the paradox resonates across disciplines. Zeno's paradox also serves as a powerful teaching tool. It introduces students to the challenges of infinity and the importance of mathematical reasoning. It demonstrates how philosophical questions can lead to scientific innovation and how abstract ideas can have practical applications. In the classroom, the dichotomy paradox helps learners understand the foundations of calculus and the nature of limits. It encourages critical thinking and nurtures curiosity, showing how ancient philosophical debates continue to shape modern education and research. Ultimately, Zeno's dichotomy paradox is far more than a riddle from antiquity. It invites us to explore the profound relationship between perception and reality, between the infinite and the finite. It challenges us to question what we know and to appreciate the frameworks, like calculus, that allow us to navigate these mysteries. By contemplating this paradox, we deepen our understanding not only of mathematics and motion, but of human thought itself. It reminds us that our intuitions, though powerful, are not infallible, and that reason, logic, and creativity can bridge the gap between what seems impossible and what is demonstrably real.